Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a really wonderful opportunity to talk to you about an amazing site that we were fortunate enough to excavate last summer during the summer of 2020. At the site of the new electrical substation at Dalchork, just north of Leg. This is where we're talking about. It was a recently deforested site, pretty much due east of the Kinloch-Burvey turning, just north of Leg. And although the wider development area encompassed a very large area, the focus of the archaeological works was really limited to a relatively small portion of that site, as indicated on this map. The rectangle in blue was where we focused most of our attention, that being the footprint of the principal development, although some other small areas were looked at through a watching brief, which I'll talk about in more detail later on. The primary area of our focus shown here within its wider landscape. This is a great photograph taken during a drone survey that we had done for the project. This is looking south-southeast across the site. The four roundhouses, which I'll talk about in much more detail shortly, are indicated by the arrows in the foreground. But this shows you just where they sit within the landscape, quite a distance from the shore of Loch Shen, and Leg itself is just around the corner of the hill to the left of the picture. In January 2020, ahead of the main phase of excavation later that summer, we undertook an evaluation of the site, which was conducted purely through hand excavation. The trenches that outlined on this map were all hand dug and were a maximum of 75 centimetres to a metre wide, purely aimed to give us a very quick snapshot of the structures themselves, what they were composed of, how well they were preserved, and where possible to retrieve preliminary dating evidence. So this is the post-ex plan of Site 1, which was what caught most people's eye when visiting the site. Firstly because it was nearest the access track, but also it was one of the most well preserved in terms of standing height of all the four roundhouses that we excavated. The banks survived to as much as about 1 metre high in a lot of places. The roundhouse was 5 to 6 metres in diameter on the inside, which was well defined by a quite well faced inner wall face, which clearly had been repaired on at least one occasion, which may have been during the renovations leading to the phase 2 of the structure. This was seen in various ways. Firstly, the post holes that are laid out here have been phased but it also the wall itself appears to have been extended in width, so extra material built around the outside, as can be seen here in the southwest slot, and also here as well. At the south side of the structure, there was quite a grand entrance passage that we can see the internal aspect of in that central photograph, with quite large orthostats forming the entrance passage itself, as well as its the edges of it on the internal wall face. The inside of the structure was quite a busy place, as you saw on that post-ex plan. A lot of the post holes that were found in structure 1, site 1, were like those shown here and those bottom 3 photographs. Relatively small, stone lined with packing stones in a lot of them. But within the middle of the site, right at the heart of the roundhouse, there was a hearth identified quite early on. The picture at the top left shows the phase 2 hearth, which was quite a large slab, stone slab, laid in the middle. It, when found, was fractured, but presumably originally had been one larger stone, although that's perhaps conjecture. And above that, immediately laying on top of that stone, were some very, very shallow deposits of charcoal. Below that, there was a phase 1 hearth discovered, that second picture at the top there, which didn't appear to have been lined with stone or anything, but the underlying deposits appear to have just been thoroughly scorched. Now, interestingly, this sat within a rounded oblong shape of stake holes, which we can just about see here, and they continued right around the phase 1 fire pit. The final abandonment of this structure appears to have been brought about by a large conflagration of widespread fire, which left quite a thick deposit of burnt material and charcoal-rich material across particularly the interior, but to a lesser extent the walls and the exterior collapse. And amongst this, in the northeastern quadrant of the excavation of the interior, we found a really quite beautiful and rare fragment of shale bangle, which hopefully you can see just here. So moving on to site 2, this was one of the larger of the 4 roundhouses that we excavated, and sat highest up on the hill. The internal space of this roundhouse measured approximately 9 meters in diameter, and as you can see from this post-ex plan, there was a significant number of post holes, many of them quite large, certainly in comparison to site 1, forming 2 distinct concentric rings of post holes, and with some further work perhaps needs to be done, but the preliminary idea was that some of these posts had buttressing posts associated with them, but also that there was a multiple phase of repair and replacement, which would explain the increased number in certain areas. There was quite a distinctive entrance passage lined with orthostats, having a slight curve to it, and bordered by a pair of post holes at the open outside face of it. The structure itself was composed principally of turf, unlike structure 1, although it was stone lined on the inner face, presumably to create some strength. There was indications that it had been stone lined on the outer face, but this was less clear. The inner face of the wall and on the northwestern edge of it here was survived to several courses of stonework high, held in place by the large tree trunk that you can see there. Here's a photogrammetry model extract of that entrance passage. You can see the beautiful large orthostats on the western side, which is the right hand side of the picture. This is taken from the inside looking out, and you can see the beautiful paving that was laid through here. And this was actually the last phase of repair and replacement of paving through this area. From amongst these stones in the entrance passage, we recovered this large fragment of quernstone, which had been reused as part of that paving. Here's a section of that entrance passage further excavated with the large double post hole on either side, with the one of the beautiful post-excavation drone photographs of Site 2. Site 3 was the smallest of the 4 roundhouses, only measuring about 5 meters in diameter internally, and actually probably one of the least well preserved of the 4. This one was slightly odd in that it was purely made of stone and appeared to have collapsed into a very strange teardrop shape to the southeast, which was partly downhill but not entirely. The internal structures that were identified were much more scant than in the other roundhouses. You can see here there's several post holes but without a coherent pattern to them. Potential hearth slabs in the middle, although no hearth deposits were identified on the top of these because the surviving stratigraphy above those stones was negligible. I mean, part of those stones were visible pre-excavation. At the northern side of this internal space was a really odd ditch, stone lined, and you can see that here in these 2 photographs, leading from roughly the centre of the inner space back towards that large orthostat which formed part of the internal wall face. And associated with it, although not clearly explained at the moment, was this stone box type feature seen in that right hand photograph. It's unclear what these two or this small complex of features was used for. Full excavation of the interior revealed it basically went straight onto bedrock in places, and very little of any of the deposits survived. So moving on to Site 4, the fourth of the roundhouses. This lay to the east of the others and was by far the largest, with an internal diameter of approximately 12.5 metres. There was only a single ring of post holes identified in this structure. As you can see from this post-ex plan and the drone photograph, each of these was quite large, some of them up to half a metre in diameter. And then, interestingly, at the south-southeast of that internal space was a complex little arrangement of post holes just here, forming the inner portion of the entrance passageway. The external portion was not identified at any point during the excavation, and may well be due to the later activities that have removed the eastern portion of this bank here. The internal space had suffered greatly from the presence of the forestry, where trees had been planted across this site, and those brown areas indicated on the plan were particularly badly hit by that. At the centre of the site, laying within the kind of turf and peat deposits, was a single hearthstone that was identified purely based on its shape and location. The deposits surrounding it had been transformed into peat. The pictures on the left here show a really nice, almost time-lapse progress of the excavation through to its final state. And the images on the right show you some of the structure of the walls and banks forming this roundhouse. The outer wall face, as you can see from that bottom right photograph, quite crude in structure, using very irregular boulders. A small section of inner wall face was identified during the excavation on the northern side of that internal space, again quite crudely built, and most of the walls appeared to be rubble filled. On the northern side of Site 4, there was a large pit feature identified initially during the excavation of the internal deposits, but was subsequently shown to extend beneath the wall and the wall collapse. And a large fragment of saddle quern was recovered during the excavation of sections of this wall. Immediately to the south of the four fully excavated roundhouses was a quite dense cairn field comprising about 9 to 10 cairns previously identified during walkover survey. all of these were fully excavated as part of the main mitigation, and although none of them were found to have any internal structural evidence, they were just piles of stone haphazardly heaped up, and no artifactual or ecofactual material was identified or able to be recovered from within or beneath them. The wider project involved a phase of watching brief as determined by construction activities. This was following the full excavation of the roundhouses, etc. These are just some images. The only feature that was identified and excavated as part of this watching brief was this large pit to the bottom right, which lay within the cairn field that we've just seen. So this has been a really beautiful opportunity to study a suite of roundhouses, all clearly in close proximity, which, subject to further analysis, may form either a small coherent settlement with buildings being used for different purposes, or a more nuanced, phased settlement. While there are similarities between some of these four and dissimilarities, these types of structures were previously seen during the Leg project, just to the south of Leg, during the 1990s at Achony Glen. So further analysis will look at those in more detail. I mean, obviously the roundhouses or hut circles are incredibly abundant across the Highlands, and other places have provided amazing examples that will need to be compared with our suite of four. For example, the Strathswadal landscape on the Isle of Skye. This excavation has yielded a wonderful collection of information and artifacts, including querns and large stone tools, including one actual cut mark stone from the edge of Site 2, and a small amount of pottery, which we'll get looked at, and not forgetting the beautiful shale bangle. Following all the relevant analysis and reporting, it is hoped that the results, together with the artifacts, will be able to be held and displayed at the Leg Heritage Centre, but time will tell. Thank you very much.